Hello and welcome to the Wolverton Workshop. In this video we will take a look at the automated uncoupling system I will be using on my N-Gauge layout, Wolverton North.
Please stand back from the platform edge.
There are a number of different methods people have used to achieve automatic uncoupling. The simplest method is to use some sort of mechanical interface that lifts up between the rails and pushes the couplings upwards to release them. This mechanism could then be operated by either a physical lever or a motorised servo. The problem is the mechanism is always visible unless it's incredibly small, and then you would have to perfectly position the train over the uncoupler, so for this reason I decided to rule out this option. The alternative is to use something like the Dapol Easy Shunt couplings, which can be opened by magnets placed between the rails. The issue with these magnets is they are also very visible on the layout, and for that reason I looked to see whether it's possible to place magnets below the track. I wanted to use permanent magnets rather than electromagnets or solenoids to remove any limits on how long the uncoupler could be active for. I had a number of bar magnets, so I started testing and found these were powerful enough to open the couplings if I was able to place them level with the top of the baseboard. The issue with using permanent magnets is, as the name suggests, they are permanently active, so the uncoupler is always on. To avoid locos unexpectedly uncoupling during normal operations, the magnets need to be moved away from under the rails when not in use. I began to look into different methods to move the magnets. Initially I looked at the idea of a hinge mechanism to pivot the magnets away from the tracks. I also thought about a linear system to lower and raise the magnets. Whilst I was playing with these ideas, it suddenly hit me that all I really need to move is the magnetic field generated across the rails. I didn't actually need to move the magnets away from the board, all I needed to do was rotate them by 90 degrees. I quickly tested this with the magnets and some spare track, and to my amazement it worked. With the magnets parallel to the rails, the couplings open nicely, but when the magnets are rotated, the couplings remain closed. My elation over this discovery was quickly dissipated when I did an online search and found that the idea was not at all unique. This had already been thought of and used by a number of other modelers. Nevertheless, I had a system that worked, and it was time to design the mechanism to implement it. I had always planned to use servos for the uncouplers, simply because I'm using them to drive my points, so I already have the control systems in place. In CAD I drew up a servo mount that would fit into a 20mm drilled hole in the baseboard. I then added a magnet mount that glues onto a standard servo horn. I printed these out and made up the test rig, leaving out the plate that would go over the servo. This allowed me to see the orientation of the magnets during the test. And here is the finished mechanism mounted into the baseboard. Once it's had its top plate added along with some cork and ballast, the unit will be entirely invisible. I'll have to think of some creative scenic elements to mark their locations on the final layout. You can see here that when the magnets are in line with the rails, the couplings open, but as the servo turns, the couplings close. When the train passes over the magnets in the off orientation, they do dip ever so slightly, but not enough to cause them to uncouple. I carried out some extensive testing and confirmed that it uncouples every single time without fail. Also, I am yet to have an accidental uncoupling when the servos are in the off position. I now have a reliable auto uncoupler that can be turned on and off as required. The only thing I found during testing that didn't work quite as well as it could was that the magnets I'm using are not powerful enough to fully open the couplings. This means I can't use the delayed coupling function to push stock down a siding away from the magnet, then release it without it coupling back up. However, I can still use this mechanism as it is in a lot of locations, such as the end of platforms, to allow the loco to uncouple from the rake of coaches. I will experiment with some larger magnets and see if I can get the delayed uncoupling to work for use on the sidings. Now all that's left to do is to carefully plan the locations to install these couplers on the final layout. And that's it for this video, so until next time, thanks for watching.
Please hold on to pushchairs, wheelchairs, and your belongings.